presents to you Honest Talk.
Hi folks, today Mr. T.N. Hari is going to join us for the talk. Mr. Hari spent the first 14 years at Tata Steel. Of this, the first 11 years was spent in engineering on the shop floor, procurement, and corporate planning. The next 3 years were in HR, helping restructure the company to cope with post-liberalization challenges. The next 18 odd years were with a string, 5 of them, of high-growth startups. The first 4 saw successful exits. Daksh was acquired by IBM, Virtusa went public on Nasdaq, Amba Research was acquired by Moody's, and Taxi4Sure was acquired by Ola. In each of these startups, Hari played a key role in shaping their growth and exit. In the last 5 years, Mr. Hari has been an advisor and sounding board to numerous young entrepreneurs and startups. He straddles the entire startup ecosystem. He is a mentor at accelerators like Techstars, Silicon Road, and Nama. He is an advisor to Arkham Ventures, which is an early stage VC fund, and Fundamentum, which is growth stage VC fund set up by Nandan Nilekani and Sanjeev Agarwal. He is a prolific author and has authored 4 books so far, and 2 are being published shortly. The last book is titled Saying No to Jugaad: The Making of Big Basket. The next 2, scheduled for an October release, are From Pony to Unicorn: Scaling a Startup Sustainably, and Sailing in a Storm: Making a Crisis Work for You. Mr. Hari has studied at IIT and IIM and worked at an executive level with multiple startups, scale-ups. LinkedIn had identified him as one of the top voices in India for 3 years in a row: 2016, 2017, and 2018. So, let's begin our talk with our today's guest, Mr. T.N. Hari.
So first of all, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much, sir, for joining and giving your important time. We are extremely very happy to have you for today's talk.
Thank you, Harsh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. It's our pleasure to have you. So moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen, is role of youth in shaping India's future. Youth are the most important and dynamic segment of the population in any country. It is believed that developing countries with large youth population could see tremendous growth provided they invest in young people, education, health, protect and guarantee their rights. So sir, my first question to you, what do you believe, how do you expect the India's youth to bring a change?
So Harsh, India is a demographically young country. It has this very strong youth bulge. It's one of the few countries in the world with such a high young population. Most of the world has aged and is aging rapidly. The US has aged, most of Europe has aged. Even China, because of the one-child policy from 1978, has become an old nation. Japan was already an old nation. So amongst the large countries, India is possibly one of the few youthful countries. So the youth are going to always play a very important role in bringing about change. And this is true not just for India, but it's been true anywhere in the world. If you go back to history also, you would notice that a lot of change originated in university campuses. Campuses from Berkeley to, so you can think of any campus. A lot of, change originated in the form of student movements in campuses. And the reason why youngsters tend to drive change is because they are most invested in change, which is that the stakes are the highest for them. For somebody who is 60 years old, they have lived their life. So there's not much at stake for them. Even if the world does not change, they have lived their life. But for the youth, it's very important for them to create a better place, make the world a better place. So I think it's always bound to happen. But the flip side is that, just as youth have participated in creating some great change movements, they participated in India's freedom movement as well. But you should also remember they participated in Hitler's Nazi movement as well. So the stakes are always high and it can work both ways. So I think if the youth are focused on doing the right things and keep, the long-term interests of the country in mind, they can, drive the change in a very positive way.
All right, sir. It was really a very great answer from your side. Sir, my next question to you, sir, what do you believe? What are the skills today's youth should learn or need to learn to survive in this ever-changing world?
Yeah, so the world is changing very rapidly. I think all of us know that it's need not be said again and again. And if you look back, anyone who's over 50 years, if they look back at how the world was 40 years back, there were two different worlds. 40 years back, the world was very different from what it is today. So I have seen the world, for instance, how it was 40 years back. I can't even, think of any comparison at all on every single dimension. On the social dimension, on the technology dimension, on every single dimension, the world has changed rapidly. And therefore, I think the only skill that is essential to survive in this changing world is adaptability. So you should be able to adapt with the change. And adaptability comes from a variety of things. I think adaptability is about being curious. Adaptability is also about being open-minded. Adaptability is about accepting new ideas, new values, new forms of literature, new forms of music, new forms of social interactions, not being judgmental about current trends, not being very critical of the way the world is changing, taking risks and venturing into discomfort zones, I think is very important. You will not be able to survive if you don't venture out into a zone of discomfort. Without creating discomfort, without creating disequilibrium, without experiencing the disequilibrium, there's no way that you will be able to learn new things or acquire mastery over new ideas. So I think in very simple terms, the only important trait needed to be able to survive in a changing world is adaptability. And adaptability has multiple dimensions, and I talked to you about all those dimensions.
All right, sir. It was really a very wonderful answer again from your side. I think those who are watching this session, of course, they are going to learn something from this, and it will add some value to their life. Sir, in same context, my next question to you, sir, what do you believe? What are the different opportunities waiting for the youth?
So I think it depends upon how you define an opportunity. So an opportunity could come to you disguised as a problem, could come to you disguised as a challenge. So I think it depends upon your attitude as to how you look at an opportunity. Some people tend to see a problem and therefore not an opportunity, where somebody else will look at the same problem and see an opportunity. So I think you should have the right kind of attitude in terms of viewing everything as a possible opportunity. I can tell you, that luck favors the brave, luck favors the perseverant and hardworking. And similarly, opportunities come to those who are looking for those opportunities, not those who have given up. So if you're constantly trying, if you're patient, and if you are perseverant, then opportunities are bound to come to you. And you have to always see, problems and challenges that come across your way also as opportunities. Sometimes, a job loss can be seen as an opportunity. Sometimes you might not get promoted. You were expecting to get promoted into a key role. You might not get promoted. Maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe the company did not promote you, and maybe you were really competent, and that forced you to quit the company and go and find a place where you were valued, for instance. So I think everything should be seen as an opportunity, and once you see that, then I think the youth has infinite opportunities ahead.
All right, sir. Sir, my next question to you, sir, what do you believe how today's youth is different from the previous generation?
See, I think every generation is the product of a larger context. I think you need to understand that a generation should not be seen in isolation. And the larger context is the context of technology, social norms, culture. So if you wish to figure out how the current generation is different from the previous generation, you need to see what changed in the context. So for example, 40 years back, we did not have email. We did not have, the internet. We did not have social media. Today, for example, if you want any information, all you need to do is just Google it and you will get it. 40 years back when I was young, for instance, if you wanted any information, it was very difficult to get that information. Your library was the only place where you could get some information. But imagine how limited a school library is. Now, sitting at your workstation, you can access the MIT library. You can access information on Wikipedia and hundreds and thousands of other sources on any topic that you want. So information and knowledge is not a problem today. Information and knowledge was a problem 40 years back. So this generation does not have a problem of information. Information is excessive. In fact, the problem that they have is an overload of information. So today, for example, social media, right? You are posting something. You're looking for whether people are liking it or not. So instant gratification is what you're expecting. And today everyone can post, everyone can write. 40 years back, very few people wrote, and most people read what others wrote. So there was a reporter, there was a journalist who wrote in a newspaper, you read that article. But today you can comment on every single article, you can share your views. Anybody and everybody can become a writer, right? You're able to share your views, you're able to figure out whether people like what you're writing or not. So feedback is instantaneous. So culture has changed in many ways. So I think the previous generation and the current generation, you should see the context of how technology has changed, how culture has changed, how the world, the way it interacts has changed. So I think if you see it from that context, you'll be able to figure out how every generation is different from its previous generation.
All right, sir. When yesterday I was reading about you, sir, I found that you have played many major key roles in supporting the startup. So, sir, in same context, my question to you, sir, what do you believe how entrepreneurship empowers youth?
I think I agree. Entrepreneurship tends to empower youth because entrepreneurship puts your life almost completely in your control. Although there are still some uncertainties around the markets, around demand, around customers, but it puts a large part of your life under your control. So I think therefore it is very empowering. And you can already see that, in the last, I would say 10 to 12 years, you can see a host of young people who become entrepreneurs. So, and they have, focused on solving India's problems. So Flipkart was set up in 2008. And Flipkart was wanting to become India's Amazon. In some ways, it did become India's Amazon. And after that, you can see so many other startups founded by young entrepreneurs have actually made a big difference. Prior to, that, most entrepreneurs tried solving problems of the West. So you had, IT services companies which used labor arbitrage to figure out how problems of companies like Citibank in the US or Morgan Stanley could be solved. But you have all these companies now, startups, which young people mostly have founded, which are solving India's problems. So I think entrepreneurship is very liberating feeling. It empowers you. It puts your own life in your control. You're not working for somebody else. You're working for yourself. You're not taking directions from anybody. You are taking your own directions. You do what you think is right. Your decisions they are, and therefore you face the consequences. If things go right, it's good for you. Things go bad, it's bad for you. But you take your decisions and you face the consequence of your decisions. So I think it's very empowering for the youth. And ultimately, I think India is not going to be able to generate jobs for everybody, high-paying jobs for everybody. 12 million youth are entering employable age every year in India. There is no way India can create more than 1 million jobs a year. So 12 million coming in and you're able to create 1 million well-paying jobs. The remaining will all be blue-collar workforce. So if you want to, make an impact, if you want to make a difference, then entrepreneurship is the way forward. Mass entrepreneurship for youth is the way forward for India.
All right, sir. Sir, I have one question from one of my subscribers. The question is, sir, we have seen in some cases people believe that let's first work some year for any organization and gain the skill, then we will begin with a startup. And in other case, we have observed that the students, those who are studying or those who are in their colleges, start their own venture. So, sir, how do you look at which one is better choice?
There is no better choice. So it depends upon you. If you are, let's say you're a student, and if you feel that you have such a brilliant idea, you are sleepless every night, you can't sleep because you are just wanting to implement, execute on that idea, become an entrepreneur. If you want to be a little more thoughtful about it, if you want to, take less of a risk, if you want to see the world a little more, see, what problems are solvable, how organizations work, how teams are built. So you might then take a job and then experience a little bit of how organizations work and then plunge into entrepreneurship when you're a little more sure. So I think it depends upon your personality. There are people who plunged into entrepreneurship from campuses because they could not sleep at night. They had a brilliant idea and they wanted to try it out. So I think there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It all depends upon your personality and how you feel about it.
All right, sir. Again, it was a very wonderful answer from your side, and I think the subscriber which asked this question have got his answer. Sir, I don't want to take you much time, so moving to my last question of this session, what do you believe? What are the pillars of young India?
I think I would put the 3 E's as 3 pillars: entrepreneurship, education, and employment. I think these will be the 3 pillars of India, and I will add to that employability. So that also becomes another E. So I think entrepreneurship, I told you why it's important for a nation like India. Education, I think, is pretty important because without education, you can't, bring about sustainable change. But I think it's very important to realize that we should rethink education in India. I think India education has been treated as something that a degree that you obtain. So the point I always make is that China got old before they got rich. I think India got educated before they got skilled. As a result of which, you have very top-notch colleges in India, and we are able to send a Mars mission, a moon mission. Yet at the same time, we are unable to build roads which can avoid water logging during the monsoons. We are unable to, build bridges, good quality bridges which sustain for long. So I think we are struggling with basic engineering, but at the same time, we are also excelling in high science. So you have organizations like ISRO. I think what India needs is a lot more of skill development. So for example, education, if you study literature in some regional language in India or even in English, how does it help you get a job? How does it help you get skill? The point is, if you're seriously interested in literature, it's a good thing to do. But if you're not interested, if you're just wanting a degree, and for that you pursue literature, how will you get a job at the end of it, right? So it's very important for India to become very skilled, and therefore the focus of education should be employability. Does the education result in employability? So I think India should create more of skill-based universities and focus a lot more on job-creating education. So for example, doctors, they take 6 to 7 years to graduate. An MBBS might take about 5.5 plus 1, 6.5 years. But you don't need MBBS doctors to solve all kinds of problems. So for example, if you need to measure the power of your glasses, you don't need an MBBS doctor or an ophthalmologist to do it. You need somebody who is just trained as a refractionist, how to use that equipment to measure the power for your glasses. So you need to give these kinds of degrees more and more, very simple degrees which will help, solve the problem of shortage of doctors in India, shortage of engineers in India. You don't need everybody who studies at IITs and does a 4-year program. You can have lots of diploma engineers. India needs millions of these. So I think we need to change our education, focus on entrepreneurship, make life easy for them. Employment is important. We need to create employment, and I'm sure entrepreneurs will create a lot of employment, and focus of education should be employability.
All right, sir. It was really a very wonderful answer and message from your side. And also it was a great interaction with you. Thank you so much, sir, for giving your important time. It was a healthy discussion with you over the topic.
Thank you, Harsh. Thank you so much. Take care. All the best.
Thank you, sir, for joining.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.